Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to bring you another program on Toward a Quality of Life. For us to talk, for us to be more or less a juxtaposition to the kind of talk that saturates the airwaves around this city and cities across the United States. A little bit more plain talk, a little bit less aggressive talk, and yet with an aggressive feeling and passion for the beliefs that we have. I have several ideas of my own that I would like to point out to you that we can discuss this afternoon, but please feel free to bring up any kind of questions and any kind of topics that you feel like, and I hope you are out there and ready to phone in with them. Before I talk about anything specifically too, I wanted to mention that for a long time I've been talking about us being able to have a better quality of life. And in order to get a better quality of life, we have to think very hard. There's no other way around it. We can't just have programmed reactions. And I know that deep inside, a lot of us walking around are hurt, are humbled, are confused, are isolated, are lonely. And I know that by polls taken in the United States that most people by far feel that we're kind of adrift and going in some kind of wrong direction, even though we can't articulate. So what we want to do is get a little more conversant and a little more thoughtful and a little more bringing into our lives some of this real stuff instead of the fake stuff that saturates our existence, our consuming existence, and get our thinking caps on and think. I'd like to say too that with me, I should have said this at the outset, with me today is a mighty fine crew. I've not had such a fine crew in all the time I've been doing these television shows, and I know that pretty much there are people interested in peace, in living and letting live, and justice. As am I. I may be the more aggressive of everybody here, but a very distinguished crew helping me out today, and thank you. So, the first points that we might start out with today for you to consider and call in anytime with anything you're thinking is, for example, my thinking yesterday when I'm thinking that I'm going to do this, thinking that, you know what, which I've thought for a long, long time, but really and truly, I am against war. I am against war. Now, maybe some of you have some ideas that are similar to that, different thoughts about it. Call us up. This is something we could talk about. Another thing that's important to me and should be important to everybody, and we can tell you why if you call us, is being very close and familiar with politics. Politics, what it's doing, the decisions that are being made, the so-called laws that are being made, the kind of agendas that are on the tables, whether they're having anything to do with your life getting better or not, and what kind of things we need as everyday people to make our lives better for all of us, Justice and peace and evolution. And thirdly, I was thinking that I just happened to have some personal experiences lately, and I was thinking how a lot of bad emotion continues to perpetuate itself in our families, amongst ourselves, amongst each other, and even though we cool out for a while and we settle down, like a whole legacy and a whole deep well of lousy feeling and lousy acting emotions continue to plague us as human beings and deter us and be more literal and more practical, deter us from any kind of greater consciousness, any kind of greater cooperation, any kind of evolution to a more communal spirit amongst us, which I know we're always wishing for. And as we sit or stand right now, we can't exactly say that we are a loving, helping, peaceable people in the world at large. And wouldn't it be nice if we were really strenuously always working towards that kind of goal? Again, back to the ideas of what I said before, respect and deference and a kind of brotherly love towards each other, and justice, equity, so that we all have something relatively decent. Shouldn't we be working sort of towards us all evening out and having like a better quality of life? Now, the reason I'm against war, is so many reasons, but I don't believe in just going out and killing somebody and doing something atrocious. I believe that just like with the death penalty, if you do something horrible to someone, you're doing the same thing that someone may have done to you, something very horrible and nasty, and you're doing sort of a very lousy, nasty thing to another human being, and you're also furthering the heritage of people being vicious to each other. One vicious act perpetrating another vicious act, and the viciousness continues to go on. Does this mean that I would like to be tolerant to people who so-called want to do us harm? Hardly. But does it mean that I want to go and kill and make bloodshed and have the vengeful part of human nature continue to perpetuate itself? Absolutely not. And one day I was meandering and just musing. It just struck me like an epiphany how wild and weird and out of the question it is to jump up because you're angry and go and do something vicious to someone. How unbelievably unsuited and queer such a thing is to do. Now, of course, you know that when you go to war, as we are in a war right now, so many people get hurt. And so much hurt then continues to be part of the society and part of the culture, as is the hurt that's come down to us from Vietnam, and the hurt that's come down to us from World War II, and the hurt that will come down and continue to come down to us from the Iraq War. If you read some of the stories of what the military people are saying there, some people, of course, verbalize being gung-ho and getting a job done, and so many others are ruined, are stressed, are unable to face society if you're very carefully watching the stories of people that are in Iraq or returning from Iraq. And then, of course, all the peoples whose lives will be so mangled and disturbed. It's a very queer thing to think of bombing as a way to do something in life, going ahead and something up as a way to get to a constructive point, to get to peace. It doesn't make sense. It's very queer indeed. And of course we know that many thousands of people in Iraq who are human, who want as good a quality of life as do you or I, are suffering terrific fates because we are at war. War. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Yes, so I am against war. And that segues into having to be very concerned about how we're living together as people and what our politics should be and what kind of choices we're going to make about things that happen to us and things that we want to accomplish. We have to think very hard. Now, one of the questions that came in today is a notable difference between the response to the Hurricane Katrina versus to the Hurricane Rita, both of which just happened in the South. As you know, we've had those, it's been almost 4 weeks now, I believe. We've had those many, many days of hurricane news and horrible, horrible conditions and circumstances. which by environmentally are a very good clue to how far afield we're going with the environment when our winds are going up to 145 miles an hour and higher in much more frequency. Certainly there have been winds like this at times in the past, but we're getting more and more storms with higher velocity winds and more rain being dumped in a short period of time. And there doesn't have to be debate. All there has to be is a little common sense to realize that, put this together with so many other things that are happening, like the melting of the snows in the Arctic and the starving polar bears who can't get on some ice to get the food that they need, and the Indian villages that can't get their sustenance because everything is melting away in the northern part of our globe, as well as just looking at the quality of our air, smelling of our air, seeing how dirty the water is, on and on and on, or to look at the chemicals that we have in abundance. Each one of us has a ton of chemicals that are poisonous and wrong, and multiply that by billions every day, every minute, to know that environmentally we're really askew, really askew. And if I were a person who looked to the Bible, which I neither do nor do not, but I interpreted things as people often do, according to the Bible, certainly we would look at these last two hurricanes as biblical events, as events of a watershed, mega, huge, phenomenal happening. The first hurricane through Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, and the second hurricane through Texas and Louisiana. These are watershed events, and if you're prone to interpret things as God coming and giving you a message, I think you might be getting a message loud and clear that things are not right, and ruination is happening. And no sooner does that happen than, as always happens, California is on fire where it shouldn't be, and so many things will happen one after another that shouldn't be happening, because water is being diverted and developments are being made, and the land is parched, and there really shouldn't be development there, and there you have it. The thing goes up in smoke because the land naturally should not be going through the kinds of developments that it is, with the water being diverted and used as it is as well. So there you have it. You have burning and drowning all at once. And back to the difference between Katrina and Rita, which is a very sad, immoral event, watershed event in the history of the United States. And it's an event, no matter where you sit on the spectrum, that will have wounded all of us, whether we're carrying that wound consciously and up front, or if it doesn't really affect us too much consciously, we're still carrying the wounds of what happened. It crippled all of us to a great degree to see what with the Hurricane Katrina, which was an event that was handled and unfolded in a very different way than hurricanes have unfolded in the past. Some people have brought out that in the suburb of Miami called Homestead, Florida, which had the hurricane, I believe it was Andrew or Hugo, I think Andrew, that the response to that hurricane was very slow as well. And it may well have been. There was a lot of havoc. I remember when Homestead suffered the great devastation that it did, and there was all kinds of suffering back then for a long time. Of course, people didn't drown because they did not have the flooding that happened in Louisiana and to New Orleans. But back to New Orleans. First of all, the United States government and the military, the Pentagon, the president, the legislature, all the functionaries, to say the least of FEMA, Homeland Security, et cetera, all of those agencies know when something like an event such as Katrina is happening. They know about it as it's coming. They know about it right before it comes. They know about it when it comes, and they know about it after it comes. This is just basic knowledge that all our great satellite and radar, other kinds of sophisticated technology and organization provide us with. These are the kinds of things we readily have available at our fingertips, just like when NASA wants to run a spaceship into orbit. They know in advance, they know projecting into the future, they know everything about. And we have the National Weather Bureau, the acronym is NOAA. I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but they are extraordinarily sophisticated, and they keep data on everything right down to a local storm in a small town somewhere if the winds are going to be unusual or unusually strong. So the knowledge is there, it's ever present, and it's always a concern. And this was a mega event that the media was telling us about in advance of its coming. We all knew about it. People were glued. I remember being in a facility the night before it was coming, and in between doing things, people were going to the television, seeing what the status was on Katrina, and they were telling us how it was coming and how strong the winds were. Not only does the United States and its agencies know these things, but other countries know these things. China knows, Beijing knows, Moscow knows, everybody knows who's in the know when events like this are happening around the world. So here we had this horrible hurricane coming, and it came. And apparently nobody was ready with having the evacuation supplies, meaning transportation and other kinds of emergency foods and waters in advance, even waiting, as apparently they did with Rita, apparently they did with the recent hurricane or two that happened in the state of Florida in this same season, not too long ago. In other words, you know it's coming, you know the projection, you know how bad it is, you know this is a catastrophic event, and yet action was not in place. Action by the agencies that know best, through the agencies that know best, such as the National Weather Service, our military, and executive branches of government. So then the hurricane came, and it must have been a horribly frightening event, and I don't even know how people got separated from each other. I wonder about that. I wonder how children and parents got separated. Were they rushing around? Were they running from debris? Were they running from wind? Were they running, or would they get separated after, during? How did so many people, not children, but relatives, get separated from each other? And how did it happen that so many people could not be gotten to safety before the catastrophe itself happened by their own relatives and so on? I don't know exactly. Of course, in some cases, it just wasn't done. But it's still unknown to me, because I haven't gotten the full story of how people could have been separated from each other as they were. So the terrible catastrophe happened. Terrible catastrophe. And then, of course, they say the state is supposed to, many people get very angry when they talk about this, and they say, do not criticize the federal government, that the local and the state organizations are supposed to be the first responders, so to speak, and they were supposed to be ready. There may be some fault that the buses weren't in line. There may be some fault there, but when so catastrophic is occurring, and it's so well known, the federal government, by common sense, would be ready, would be calling up, saying, how are we going to coordinate this, would be talking with Louisiana, would be talking with Mississippi. Even Trent Lott, I heard, speaking on the radio, who is the senator, former Speaker of the House from Mississippi, from the area that was so destroyed, has said, up till now, let alone in the beginning, there has been appropriate response to help what has happened to Mississippi. Not even talking about New Orleans, even now. And he, as you know, persons in the Republican Party, and maybe even in the Democrat, but certainly in the Republican, would not be too quick to criticize each other. And Trent has toed the line all the time. I mean, he's very much spoken on the side of the party, and I heard him speaking that he's been very disappointed that the help has not been correct in the beginning or even now. So here they were, and the federal government could commonsensically just call up, get it going, have the National Guard there, we know how bad it is. Everybody knew. Everybody was watching TV. Now, when I say everybody, I may not mean the President of the United States, because listening to Evan Thomas of Newsweek, who is a quite sober reporter to the best of my experience in having seen him on television, did an article for Newsweek that outlined how the events unfolded in Crawford, Texas, which is where the president and his entourage were during the time this hurricane was coming and during the time that it actually came. And he was in the late stages of that famous vacation that he took. I forgot, was it a month, or it was, people were commenting, he does take some pretty lengthy vacations, excuse me, in Crawford, Texas. Of course, he does go out and do some other work and get briefed while he's there and so on, but he spends a lot of time on quote-unquote vacation in Crawford, Texas. So now the Katrina happens, and I said everybody, I use that in quotations, virtually everybody, people at work, everywhere. People knew it was coming, people knew. Apparently, again, according to the article by Evan Thomas in Newsweek, who gives a day-by-day account of what went on in Crawford, the President of the United States did not know about Katrina. Maybe he did in some vague terms, but he in no way had a sense that this was very big, horrible thing coming that required attention. People of the United States were in extreme danger. Huge parts of the United States were under attack, so to speak. They were in dire straits. And we needed the military, we needed the National Guard, we needed FEMA, we needed the Red Cross, we needed all the resources that come to bear on such an awful event. And according to the article, as I heard it told on NPR radio by Evan Thomas, I believe, the people around the president, you remember the hurricane happened like Sunday into Monday. The people around the president supposedly did not want to tell the president that he was going to have to cut his vacation short and that there was this event that he had to pay attention to. Now, this is very strange because everybody, again in quotes, knew the hurricane was coming and knew the hurricane happened, except the main person on whom you depend to help you out didn't know or wasn't willing to pay attention. I don't want to put motives into his motive. And that finally they did tell him, and I guess he left Crawford on that Wednesday, I guess. Don't quote me on that. And then on Friday, when he was going to Louisiana finally to take a look at what happened, they actually played him a DVD of the hurricane so that he could see that this hurricane had happened and what kind of a hurricane it was. Now, that's too hard to believe. I bet you can't even believe a story like that. That's not a believable story. But that's the story that I heard told by Evan Thomas. And we also know it was reported in the press that when the president first went there on his way on the plane or on the ground somewhere, he was joking about his drinking days when he was going to this hurricane on his way or at it to talk or whatever, that he was making jokes. But apparently his attitude and demeanor changed when the backlash of how serious an event this was and what the proper kind of command would be started to, be a stark reality. So there we have the person on whom we depend. This is reminiscent of 9/11 when the plane reportedly hit. I don't know if it was I think the second plane, wasn't it? Was it the first or the second? Plane hit one of those buildings in New York City, and the president remained, I believe, if I don't know, don't quote me again, but for 7 minutes he remained in his seat, just looking a little bit like a deer caught in the headlights maybe, or what to do, reading to the children at whose school he was. It's kind of reminiscent of that. Oblivion. Of course, many people have other kinds of theories of why that was the case and so on. We won't get into that right now. So be that as it may, here we are, and I know another caller had asked, what about this person, I believe his name is Brown, I can't remember his first name, who heads FEMA. A negligible parameter in this whole, because as we know, this person supposedly was not qualified for the job, and we won't get into giving his background here, but it did not have the background that people do have from the Red Cross and from any other kinds of organizations around the world that deal with hurricanes or deal with relief in general or deal with being able to bring food and clothing and medicine and so on, everything you need that deal with being prepared. That this was not really in his background to any degree. And on that subject, I was also hearing someone who had done the statistics on how people are appointed in this current administration and in this term and in the last term, that the percentage of people that are appointed for being close and workable with the administration, of being a so-called bushy, of being a comfort and easy to manage and be in the same mindset and on the train and on the program, with the program, that the percentage of people who are hired on this basis rather than just going out to get the most knowledgeable and well-versed person for the position, that the percentage of the former kind of qualifications being the rule of the day is much higher than in previous administrations. So this is what, as it has advised us, was the case with the person who headed FEMA. So now here we have this most sorrowful and piercing condition that we will never forget, even if it is not on our conscious mind. We will never forget it. People drowning alive as the nation watched. Even at that point, helicopters, boats, the little dinghies, their names are, that can be sent in to go and get people. Private people were doing this. Federal people were not doing this. And I will focus on the federal because when you have something so catastrophic, and when you look at what happened with Rita, and when you look at what happened in the state of Florida and in other natural disasters, The federal government, of necessity, must be there as a first responder. It's only common sense. It's such a mammothly, overwhelming, horrible condition. And so the people drowned alive before our very eyes. And they were standing on the rooftops, and sometimes the water came up to the level they were, and they were calling for help while they stood there. And people were in their workplaces looking at the television saying on Tuesday and Wednesday, I saw this, I saw people doing this, where are the helicopters? They saw the people standing there begging. They said, where are the helicopters? Where are the dinghies? Where are the boats? The words, the truth, this is, again, as I say, this is a watershed event in United States history. We watched while people drowned alive. And I remember too, you know, I love animals so very much. I remember seeing on the internet a picture of a horse who was starved to death, standing, all his legs covered in water, nowhere to go, no food. This lone picture. How many animals starved to death while the waters rose or drowned. What horrible. Now, what happens to people when they haven't got water, they haven't got food, they think they may drown, and they don't know that it's coming? It's not like they don't have these things, and then they know if they wait 24 more hours, even 48, it'll be okay. They're desperate. They don't know that it's coming. There's no help, no way, and they're in water. They're walking in water in their chest up to their neck. They're walking in water. And they don't know. They can't see. It's going on and on. The night comes, the day comes, the night comes, the day comes, and they don't know. What happens to people in that? I'll tell you what would happen to me at the first threat. I'd be the first one trying to survive. I'd be the first one fighting for my life. I'd be the first one trying to get some food, trying to get some water. I'd be the first one in line. That's the kind of person that I am. What happens to people? And we all know that horrible, 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 heartbreaking story of the boy boarding the bus with one of his relatives to finally get evacuated and having his dog Snowball ripped out of his arms and screaming, "Snowball, Snowball." And vomiting because he was so upset. Anyway, we've seen a lot of human decay, human destitution, human demorality, human degradation. We saw an event, a biblical event, go before our very eyes. We saw that we just let it happen. And according to Trent Lott in Mississippi, we continue to just let it happen, that there hasn't been help forthcoming, and that the area is still like a trash heap, garbage dump with wrecked lives and ruination all around. Now people will say, what led to, why did this happen? Why did this happen in the land where we have all the planes, we have all the boats, we have all the food, we have all the water, we have all the organization, all the know-how, we have all the technology, we have everything. We have a call. Here we go.
Okay.
Hello?
All right, I'm a senior. I'm 77 years old, and I think it was a disgrace what happened with Katrina. I think the federal government was very lax, and all over the world were so stupid that we can't take care of our own people in a time like that. And the president was on vacation for 5 weeks in Crawford. That's what he goes for. And none of his workers wanted to tell him because they didn't want to disturb him. And that's another terrible thing, that his workers feel they can't tell him something because he'll be upset, cutting his vacation short 2 days. I can't stop watching television. I'm so upset with what's happened down. I've donated money. That's all I can do, and they have my prayers. All right, and thank you for being on television and talking about it.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, caller. And I echo her sentiments totally, and we're coming down to the wire. I want to say, make sure I make a few points about Katrina. I was getting to what people say was the cause of there being no response to people drowning alive. Before I even say that, I want to say another thing, which is neither here nor there for what the people went through. But when you hear that it was New Orleans, it so happens that Fats Domino is alive, but there were things that came across the wire that said he wasn't in communication. They couldn't hear from Fats Domino with that. And I'm not really a New Orleans fan. I mean, of course I'm a fan. That's the music of the United States. But when I heard that, it just hit me like here, like, oh, it brought it all home that Fats Domino may be missing, and he wasn't after all, but many musicians they thought were missing, and I guess some really were missing. But then you realize New Orleans, which is neither here nor there for what the people suffered. But you're talking about New Orleans. You're talking about, you're walking to New Orleans. And you're talking about in 1814, we took a little trip along with Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon and we took a little beans and we met the mighty British at the town of New Orleans. And there's other songs. And of course, Wynton Marsalis he's on the board now to bring them back. Well, that's a whole other question. Can New Orleans come back? And I'm still going to answer before we leave. What led to there being no response? But Wynton Marsalis is a great spokesperson. He says he's not really political, but he's a fabulous speaker on topics that are essentially political. And he's on the board to bring back New Orleans. And I don't know technically if that can be done because the wetlands that were encroached upon, that were the buffer between that water coming in, are a big reason why, if not the reason why, New Orleans went under. And I think a rethinking, not the quick one that just says, oh, we'll give you $200 billion just the next day, from no response to like, oh, don't worry, you know, no thinking either way, no thinking either way. but that really actually it can't be done, that New Orleans wouldn't flood again the way it did, in short, with another catastrophe, with another big wind event, with another, which likely can come. So, but anyway, and back to Wynton Marsalis, I want to say these things both fast because, you know, the idea how it cuts through you when you realize what New Orleans is. What New Orleans is, and it doesn't matter because the suffering of the people, well, that's something else, and how writers wrote about the community down there, what it was, and how people took their time, and how they were easygoing, and how this was the life they loved, and all of this, which we don't have time to get into, and it just stabs you, which doesn't go to the heart of every individual that drowned alive, had a family member drowned alive, or is in shock wandering around, or is an evacuee, a displaced person in some other state now. But to the question of why was there no response? Why did it take, let's face it, let's tell the truth, why did it take so long to get some water, to get some food, to get some helicopters, to get some boats? Come on, let's talk sensibly here. Some people say it was the race issue. And I suppose if the race was something on my mind, if it were my race and it were pertinent to me, I couldn't help but feel very, very, very disturbed and alerted once again, I guess I would have to say. And other people say, well, it's a democratic state, and there's no real connection. You know, the that Republicans tend to go with Republicans and maybe didn't help out to such a state that wasn't in the right corner, which is, again, an unbelievable story, if there were any truth to that. And maybe the connections just weren't there. And then others say, which satisfies people of all races. I don't know exactly how accurate it is, but it satisfies people of all races that it was a matter of socioeconomic class. That if you don't have the right connections, the right money, the right wherewithal, good luck to you in the United States of America. So this is some of the story of Hurricane Katrina versus Hurricane Rita. And it will be a permanent wound and a permanent turning, consciously or unconsciously, for us as a whole people, and probably for the world, because this was not an underdeveloped country, so to speak. This was the United States of America, and it was the United States that says freedom and justice for all. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We'll be back here on the 31st of October, Monday afternoon, 2 p.m. Thank you, callers. This is Toward a Quality of Life. Thanks to all the wonderful crew we have here today. Thank you, Barbara, for helping me make this happen. And good afternoon to you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.